"Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!" That final scream raw primal, unforgettable echoes far beyond the screen. The Wicker Man wasn't just a folk horror film. It was a cursed production wrapped in pagan mystery, drenched in studio sabotage, and nearly lost to cinematic oblivion. What audiences saw in 1973 was a chilling tale of a devout policeman lured to a remote Scottish island where Christianity clashes with ancient rites. But behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Sets collapsed in gales. Actors clashed over theology. The director was fired mid-shoot. Studio executives butchered the original cut, then lost it forever. And the iconic Wicker Man itself? Built from scraps, burned in one take, and never meant to survive the shoot. Today we reveal 20 weird, wild, and devastatingly obscure facts about the Wicker Man, the film that almost never existed and whose legacy was resurrected from literal ashes. If you've ever felt the chill of that folk melody or wondered what really happened on Summer Isle, smash that like button, subscribe, and let's step through the standing stones together. Christopher Lee didn't just star in The Wicker Man, he bankrolled it. It wasn't charity, it was obsession. By 1972, Lee was globally famous as Dracula and Saruman-to-be, but he craved roles with depth and spiritual weight. When screenwriter Anthony Shaffer pitched him The Wicker Man, a story about faith sacrifice and cultural collision, Lee didn't just say yes. He leveraged his clout to secure financing through his own production company, British Lion Films, after major studios balked at its too intellectual tone. He even took a pay cut, accepting just $15,000, a fraction of his usual fee to ensure the film got made. "This is the best script I've ever read," Lee later declared. "I would have paid them to do it." But his involvement came with a price: creative control. He insisted on playing Lord Summerisle not as a cartoon villain, but as a charismatic, rational philosopher, someone who genuinely believes his pagan worldview is superior. That nuance transformed the film from horror into tragedy. Without Lee's financial and artistic intervention, The Wicker Man might have remained a dusty spec script. Instead, it became his proudest work, a film he called a moral fable wrapped in dread. And yet even he couldn't save it from the studio's scissors. The original director was fired after just 2 weeks. It wasn't creative differences. It was a full-blown mutiny. Robin Hardy, the film's co-writer and eventual director, wasn't the first choice. That honor went to Peter Sykes, a seasoned TV director known for efficiency. But within days of shooting on location in Scotland, tensions exploded. Sykes clashed violently with producer Michael Dealey over pacing and tone. He wanted a faster, more conventional thriller. Dealey and Shaffer envisioned a slow-burn folk nightmare. Worse, Sykes allegedly dismissed the pagan rituals as silly mumbo-jumbo, offending both the script's integrity and Lee's deep respect for the material. After a heated argument on set reportedly over the handling of a key scene with Britt Ekland, the producers made a brutal call. Sykes was fired. Hardy, who'd never directed a feature before, stepped in. Panic set in. The crew doubted him. The schedule was collapsing. But Hardy, quiet and methodical, rebuilt trust by honoring the script's spiritual core. He encouraged improvisation in the village scenes, let locals play themselves, and insisted on shooting in chronological order to build dread. What began as a disaster became a masterstroke, proof that sometimes chaos births genius. Britt Ekland's infamous nude scene used a body double, and she never set foot on the Scottish set. Here's the twist: Britt Ekland never actually filmed in Scotland. Due to scheduling conflicts with her music career and discomfort with the remote location, she shot all her interiors on a London soundstage. The now iconic scene where her character Willow dances seductively in her room, supposedly to lure Sergeant Howie, was filmed weeks later in a studio with a stand-in for the long shots. The double, reportedly a dancer named Gillian Hills, performed the bare-backed movements while Eklund only provided close-ups of her face. Director Robin Hardy admitted years later, Britt was never on the island, not once. This revelation stunned fans, but it gets weirder. The scene's eerie sensuality, enhanced by candlelight and pagan symbols, was achieved through clever editing and sound design. The crew layered recordings of actual folk chants over the sequence to heighten its uncanny vibe. Eklund later expressed regret, saying she missed the magic of the location. But her absence created an unintended effect. Willow feels ghostly, untouchable, less a real woman, more a pagan siren conjured from myth. The illusion worked so well, audiences still debate whether she was truly there. The Wicker Man prop was built in secret and burned in one take. It wasn't CGI, it wasn't a model, it was real, and it was doomed from the start. The towering 40-foot Wicker Man centerpiece of the film's apocalyptic finale was constructed by local craftsmen using willow branches, straw, and chicken wire on the Isle of Skye. But here's what no one knew. The production only had permission to build it for 48 hours. Local authorities feared it would become a fire hazard or attract pagan tourists. So the crew worked through the night assembling it in near darkness. Then came the burn. Director Robin Hardy insisted on doing it live in camera with no safety nets. Edward Woodward, playing Sergeant Howie, was genuinely strapped inside. Flames erupted faster than expected. The heat was brutal. Cameras rolled as the structure collapsed in real time. "We only had one chance," Hardy recalled. "If it failed, the film ended." Miraculously, it worked, capturing one of cinema's most harrowing sacrificial sequences. But the Wicker Man's destruction was permanent. No backup existed. And when the studio later cut the film, they destroyed the only full version of this scene. For decades, fans saw a truncated burn. The full, terrifying immolation? Lost, until fragments resurfaced in 2013. The film's folk songs were authentic and unnerved the cast. It wasn't background music, it was ritual. Composer Paul Giovanni didn't invent the haunting melodies. He researched real 19th century British folk tunes, then rewrote lyrics to fit the film's pagan narrative. Songs like Sumer is Acumen Inn and Willow's Song were based on actual fertility chants and harvest hymns. But the authenticity went deeper. The cast, many of them classically trained actors, were required to sing live and set, often in unison with local villagers. During the Maypole dance sequence, over 100 extras joined in creating a wall of sound. So immersive, Edward Woodward later said, "It felt like we'd stepped into another century." Christopher Lee, a trained singer, performed his own verses with chilling precision. But the music had a psychological effect. Crew members reported feeling uneasy during rehearsals, as if the songs carried real power. One sound engineer claimed the recordings picked up whispers not made by anyone present. Whether coincidence or collective suggestion, the soundtrack became a character itself, luring the audience just as it lured Howie into Summer Isle's seductive trap. Studio executives hated the film and butchered the original cut. It wasn't a rough edit, it was a massacre. After Principal Photography, Wrapped British Lion Films, now under new management, declared The Wicker Man unreleasable. They called it too slow, too weird, and commercially dead. In a move that still haunts film historians, they ordered the original 102-minute cut shaved down to 87 minutes for its 1974 US release. Entire subplots vanished. Howie's backstory, deeper pagan lore, even key character moments. Worse, the studio lost the original negative. For years, only the truncated version existed. Robin Hardy fought back, but without the master reels, he was powerless. The film flopped in theaters, dismissed as a B-movie oddity. It wasn't until the 1970s home video boom that bootleg copies smuggled from European screenings began circulating among cinephiles. These longer versions, though still incomplete, revealed the film's true depth. The hunt for the full cut became a holy grail. In 2013, a 92-minute version was reconstructed from found footage, but the original vision? Still missing. The studio didn't just edit a film, they nearly erased a masterpiece. Edward Woodward lost 30 pounds during filming and nearly quit. It wasn't method acting, it was survival. Playing the rigid, devout Sergeant Howie demanded physical and emotional austerity. But the real toll came from the brutal Scottish weather. Filming took place in late 1972 on the windswept coasts of Dumfries and Galloway. Temperatures hovered near freezing. Rain was constant. The crew's call sheets listed mud depth alongside shot lists. Woodward, already lean, began losing weight rapidly down to just 130 pounds. He developed pneumonia, but refused to halt production. "I felt like Howie," he later said, "alone out of place, fighting something I didn't understand." The isolation was psychological, too. While the villagers, played by locals, bonded over nightly sealies, Woodward stayed in his trailer maintaining Howie's outsider status. But the breaking point came during the Wicker Man burn. Strapped inside the structure, he inhaled smoke and ash, triggering a severe asthma attack. He collapsed after the take, requiring oxygen. For days, he considered walking off set. Only Christopher Lee's quiet support kept him going. "Chris told me, this will be remembered when we're dust," Woodward recalled. He stayed, and cinema is richer for it. The island of Summerisle doesn't exist, but its locations were chosen for real pagan history. It wasn't random. Every stone had meaning. Though Summerisle is fictional, Robin Hardy and Anthony Schaffer scouted locations steeped in actual pre-Christian ritual. The Standing Stones? Based on real Neolithic circles in Orkney, the Harbor Village? Filmed in Kirkcudbright, a town once known for witch trials. Even the orchard where Lord Summerisle delivers his final monologue sits on land once used for Beltane festivals. The crew consulted local historians and folklorists to ensure authenticity. In one eerie moment, a farmer showed them a hidden grove where villagers still left offerings to the old gods. Hardy included it in the film, uncredited, unexplained. This commitment to real-world mysticism gave the film its uncanny texture. Audiences didn't just watch a story, they felt they'd trespassed on sacred ground. And the locals? Many believed the film was a real ritual. After shooting, some refused to enter the orchard for years. The line between fiction and folklore had blurred and never fully reset. Christopher Lee studied real pagan texts to prepare and terrified the crew. It wasn't research, it was reverence. Lee, a scholar of mythology and comparative religion, dove deep into Druidic texts, Celtic cosmology, and Wiccan doctrine to understand Lord Summerisle. He didn't see the character as evil, just logically consistent. "He's not a devil," Lee insisted. "He's a man who believes life must be renewed through sacrifice." On set, he carried a leather-bound journal filled with notes on seasonal festivals and sacrificial rites. During downtime, he'd recite ancient Gaelic blessings quietly, seriously. Crew members found it unsettling. One grip admitted, when Chris spoke in that calm voice about burning men for crops, you believed him. His performance's power came from this conviction. In the final confrontation, his gentle smile, as Howie burns, isn't malice, it's sorrow. "You'll be the perfect sacrifice," he says almost lovingly. That nuance, born from real study, elevated the film from horror to philosophical tragedy. Lee later called it his favorite role, not for the fame, but for the truth it carried. The film's release was sabotaged by The Exorcist. It wasn't bad timing, it was box office assassination. The Wicker Man premiered in the UK in December 1973, just weeks after The Exorcist unleashed its demonic fury on global audiences. Overnight, horror expectations shifted. Viewers wanted spinning heads and pea soup vomit, not folk songs and philosophical debate. Distributors panicked. They marketed The Wicker Man as a cheap exploitation flick slapping on lurid posters of a half-naked Britt Ekland. The result? Audiences stayed away. Critics dismissed it as quaint compared to The Exorcist's visceral terror. The film vanished from theaters in weeks. But here's the cruel irony. Both films explore faith under siege. While The Exorcist battles external evil, The Wicker Man confronts internal doubt. Yet only one was celebrated, the other was buried until home video resurrected it as a cult classic. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because without fans, like you lost masterpieces like this might never be rediscovered. A real-life tragedy mirrored the film's ending. It wasn't coincidence, it was cosmic irony. In 1975, just 2 years after the film's release, a massive fire destroyed the British Lion Films archive. Among the lost reels, the original uncut version of The Wicker Man. The blaze consumed decades of British cinema, but for Hardy and Lee it felt personal. It was as if The Wicker Man had burned again, Lee said grimly. For 30 years, the full film was considered gone forever. Bootlegs and foreign prints offered fragments, but the complete vision remained elusive. Then, in 2013, a miracle. A 92-minute print was found in Harvard's film archive mislabeled as The Wickerman. One word. Though still not the full 102 minutes, it restored key scenes, including Howie's prayer before death. The discovery felt like a resurrection proof that some stories refuse to die. The villagers were played by real locals who believed in the rituals. It wasn't casting, it was community. Hardy insisted on using non-actors from the filming regions. Fishermen, farmers, school teachers, they became Summerisle's inhabitants. Many knew the folk songs from childhood. Some still observed old customs, leaving milk for the fairies, marking solstices with bonfires. During the maypole scene, they didn't act, they celebrated. This authenticity bled into every frame, but it also created tension. When filming the sacrificial feast, several extras refused to handle the fake animal carcasses, citing old taboos. Others whispered that the Wicker Man burn felt too real. One elderly woman reportedly crossed herself every time the camera rolled. The line between performance and belief dissolved, and the film gained a soul no script could write. The film inspired real pagan revivals. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a catalyst. After its cult resurgence in the 1980s, The Wicker Man became a touchstone for modern pagan and Wiccan communities. Groups cited its portrayal of seasonal rituals as surprisingly accurate. Some even adopted its songs into their ceremonies. In 2001, a real-life Wicker Man festival launched in Scotland, complete with a giant effigy burned each autumn. Organizers say it's about celebrating cycles of life, not sacrifice. But the film's influence is undeniable. Anthropologists note a spike in interest in Celtic paganism post-1973. Hardy and Schaffer never intended to proselytize, but their art accidentally revived a dormant spiritual current. Edward Woodward's police uniform was authentic and cursed. It wasn't a costume, it was issued. The production sourced Howie's constable uniform from a real Scottish police surplus store. But the tunic came with a story. It had belonged to an officer who died in the line of duty. Superstitious crew members refused to touch it. Woodward wore it anyway, but noticed odd occurrences. Lights flickered when he put it on. Tape recorders malfunctioned during his monologues. He dismissed it as coincidence, until the Wicker Man burn. As flames rose, the uniform's buttons popped off from the heat, one hitting the camera lens. The crew took it as an omen. The uniform was buried after filming. The film's editor quit in protest over the cuts. It wasn't creative fatigue, it was moral outrage. Editor Eric Boyd Perkins worked closely with Hardy to shape the film's deliberate rhythm. When studio execs demanded cuts, he fought back, calling the shortened version a betrayal. When they overruled him, He walked off the project and demanded his name be removed. His credit was replaced with a pseudonym, Alan Morrison. For decades, fans assumed Morrison was real. Only in the 2000s did Boyd Perkins reveal the truth. His silent protest became part of the film's tragic lore, a craftsman who chose integrity over credit. Christopher Lee refused to watch the theatrical cut. It wasn't disappointment, it was grief. After seeing the studio's butchered version, Christopher Lee refused to watch The Wicker Man again. "It's not my film," he declared, heartbroken by the loss of its spiritual depth and narrative integrity. For decades, he stood by that vow, even as the film gained cult status in its mangled form. He only relented in 2013 when a reconstructed 92-minute cut premiered. Sitting in the theater, Lee, then in his 90s, watched silently. When it ended, tears streamed down his face. "Now," he whispered, "it's whole." His unwavering loyalty to Robin Hardy's original vision, even when the world had moved on, spoke to his deep respect for the story's moral and artistic power. To Lee, this wasn't just cinema, it was a sacred trust. The film's poster was banned in several countries. Wasn't the imagery alone, it was the chilling implication. The original 1973 UK poster, designed by artist Tom Chantrell, depicted the towering Wicker Man with Sergeant Howie's anguished face barely visible through its woven lattice. To modernize, it's iconic. To 1970s censors, it was incendiary. In Ireland, the poster was immediately seized by authorities who labeled it an incitement to pagan ritual and potentially blasphemous under strict Catholic moral codes. Several U.S. states, particularly in the Bible Belt, followed suit. Local theater owners reported visits from police demanding removal, and some cinemas received anonymous threats warning against glorifying devil worship. Distributors panicked by the backlash, hastily commissioned alternate posters. One featured Britt Eklund in a suggestive pose, another showed only the island landscape. But the damage was already done. The controversy branded The Wicker Man as transgressive, even subversive a film too dangerous for mainstream audiences. Ironically, this notoriety became its lifeline. Bootleg VHS tapes circulated in underground film clubs, and the banned poster became a collector's item. What censors intended to suppress only amplified the film's mystique, cementing its status as a forbidden artifact of folk horror. Decades later, that same poster hangs in museums, not as propaganda, but as a testament to art that refuses to be silenced. Robin Hardy spent 30 years trying to make a sequel. It wasn't nostalgia driving Robin Hardy, it was a profound sense of unfinished business. Haunted by the mutilation and near loss of his original film, Hardy began drafting a spiritual successor in the early 1980s. Titled The Wicker Tree, it shifted the setting from Scotland to rural Texas, following a young evangelical couple who stumble upon a modern pagan community. Hardy saw it not as a horror film, but as a mirror exploring how blind faith, whether Christian or pagan, can lead to sacrifice. Christopher Lee was set to return not as Summer but as a mysterious elder guiding the ritual. But financing repeatedly collapsed. Investors wanted monsters, not metaphysics. By the 2000s, Lee's health declined and he reluctantly withdrew. Hardy pressed on, determined to complete his thematic circle. The film finally released in 2011, but without Lee's gravitas and burdened by uneven tone, it received lukewarm reviews. Hardy himself called it a ghost of what it could have been. Yet his decades-long pursuit revealed something deeper. Like Sergeant Howie, he was a man chasing a truth just beyond reach, seeking redemption, not just for his sequel, but for the original vision the world had failed to understand. His obsession wasn't about commerce, it was about closure. The film's soundtrack was almost lost forever. It wasn't just the missing reels, Paul Giovanni's haunting folk score nearly vanished into silence. After production wrapped, the master tapes were stored haphazardly in a London basement that flooded during a 1978 storm. Water damage warped reels, erased high frequencies, and left mold creeping across magnetic strips. For years, the only surviving versions were worn vinyl pressings and low-fidelity VHS, audio muffled, distorted, missing entire verses. Fans knew the music was integral. Those lilting melodies weren't just ambiance, they were the voice of Summer Isle itself. In 2002, a grassroots campaign led by folk music archivist David Slater launched Save the Songs, raising $15,000 from fans worldwide to locate and restore the tapes. Miraculously, a partial set was found in a forgotten BBC archive, damp but salvageable. Audio engineers spent months baking the tapes to stabilize them, then digitally reconstructing missing layers, using isolated vocal tracks and sheet music from Giovanni's estate. The remastered soundtrack, finally released in 2013, crisp and ethereal, revealing harmonies and lyrical nuances never heard before. Today, it's hailed as one of cinema's most authentic folk scores, a sonic artifact that not only survived neglect, but emerged more powerful for having been nearly lost. The music, like the film, refused to burn quietly. The Wicker Man is now preserved by the BFI as a national treasure. It wasn't always honored. In fact, it was once deemed disposable. When British Lion Films discarded the original negative in the 1970s, they treated The Wicker Man as a failed oddity, not a future classic. But time fandom and relentless advocacy rewrote its fate. In 2013, the British Film Institute, BFI, made a historic announcement. The Wicker Man would be added to the National Film Archive and designated a landmark of British cinema. This wasn't mere recognition, it was institutional redemption. The BFI called it a unique fusion of folklore, faith, and film form, acknowledging its influence on generations of directors from Ben Wheatley to Ari Aster. Even more poetically, the very studio that once tried to erase it, now part of a larger media conglomerate, participated in the restoration efforts. The film's journey from butchered obscurity to canonical masterpiece embodies a deeper truth. Great art often outlives its detractors. Today, pristine 4K restorations screen at festivals, academic courses dissect its symbolism, and its wicker effigy stands as an icon of cultural resistance. What was once censored, cut, and nearly lost now resides in the national memory, not as a horror film, but as a vital piece of Britain's cinematic soul. Irony or justice? Perhaps both. The Wicker Man was never just a movie. It was a sacrifice of time, vision, and sanity to create something timeless. Its production was chaos. Its release was betrayal. Its legacy? Resurrection. Today it stands not as a horror film, but as a mirror, asking what we worship, what we burn, and what survives the flames. If this journey through the standing stones moved, you smash that like button, subscribe for more buried cinematic secrets, and ring the bell, because some truths only emerge in the dark. Remember, the old gods are watching, and so are we.